Hey guys, Scott here again. Sorry about the lack of videos and yapping lately. Still dealing with the whole buddy thing. He's still in the hospital. He's stable for now, but I'll talk about that later in videos. I really did want to go over this live stream, and it's a shame that I was not around when they did it, but I'm going to be addressing it now. I actually watched the entire thing on stream, and I was going to just upload that whole thing, but it was like 2.5 hours. That's lazy even for me. So I'd rather just go through this kind of point by point and give my thoughts on each major talking point that they discovered and wanted to talk about, basically. So first up, the major reasons that people are uninstalling are face camping, slugging, and tunneling, and that's their major factor for uninstalling the game. Interestingly, they didn't put something like, generators going too fast or, too hard to down survivors and things like that. Now, that Occam's razor tells me that's just simply because it's just not among the top reasons people leave or uninstall the game. But at the same time, I know we're going to have conspiracy theorists going, oh, it's because behavior is just survivor-sided. Blah, 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 blah. The point is, I have no idea. It would make sense that those are issues, but they're just simply not more pressing than, a guy being bled out for 4 minutes or a guy getting tunneled out of the match where they don't even get to, play the game. So I don't know. I can't explain why they don't have that there, but there's a lot less devious reasons that stuff like that wouldn't be there, as likely face camping, slugging, and tunneling are in fact the main reasons that someone would want to stop playing the game, especially if they're inexperienced. Just very, very bad new player experience. So on their next major slide, they say that face camping has seen no real major shift. Honestly, the prevalence of face camping is just very low kind of everywhere. I very, very rarely see face camping unless it's done for memes or something like that. I can understand, especially according to their data, at low MMR, you're going to have a bit more of that because you kind of don't really know even the concepts of patrolling gens. You're like, hey, I got a guy here. Let me make sure he dies. It just, kind of a new player mindset makes sense there. So it is more common at low MMR. But for the most part, face camping is pretty damn rare. It's, high MMR, it's less than 1 out of 100 games. That's pretty insane how little face camping actually happens, which is weird because it seems to be it's such a non-issue that you don't really have to do anything. You don't have to fix anything. Nothing needs to be changed here. It's such a non-issue. The anti-facecamp thing, other than a few quality of life things like being able to now actually see the bar from your teammates, which is excellent, doesn't really need to be changed very much. It's already not a very big deal anymore. So they've also noticed that survivors take more time to rescue, and I think that's just simply a direct result of the hook timers being longer. They're no longer 60 seconds, they're 70 seconds now. So on average, people will see the bar over time is moving slower than before. So they realize I have a bit more time to get there. Or people might have become smarter in terms of, meta strategies of leaving people on hooks on purpose if they're being tunneled, because that's the safest place they can technically be. So I think it's a combination of survivors overall just getting smarter, and you can just simply be on the hook longer too. So not a huge difference there, but I think that explains that little bit of disparity. When the resolve bar fills, there's a 10% increase in escape rates, which, of course there is, because that means the killer is basically throwing the game. He's just face camping one guy as 3 people do gens, and then the guy can just unhook himself. So that's sort of a no-brainer there. So in terms of changes to what they're doing, like I said, the actual resolve bar is now finally visible to all teammates. I can't tell you how many times that I have been, at 80%, and then a teammate comes and sits next to me, and as you guys are probably aware, that makes it so the bar doesn't move anymore because now the hook is basically being contested. So in those scenarios, I'm like, fucking go away, let me just unhook myself. But now that resolve bar will be visible, so these scenarios, this will basically just kind of entirely kill face camping. It was already pretty much on life support, but this will make it so it's pretty much a completely ineffective strategy. The meter actually changes in a different way as well now. So basically, in a nutshell, what this whole second line means, they've changed it to work exponentially, but it actually is slower at the start. So exponential growth means, it's faster and faster and faster and faster until it's filling up really, really quickly. And so it's going to start much slower than it used to. So that means if the killer is just kind of nearby for a couple of seconds, you're actually going to have even less of the bar filled up than before. But if the killer continues to stay in that exact same area, it's going to start going up faster and faster and faster to the point where half the bar will fill up in 5 seconds or something. Now that requires a lot of just straight up face camping. So it's really not going to be abused or anything like that. The only thing that kind of worries me a tiny bit is increasing the range from 16 to 20 meters here. That means on maps like Midwich or the game, there could be some verticality issues where you're not camping, but it kind of thinks you are. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. People really don't understand how hard it is to fill that damn bar up. Like, it's so rare. I see a actual resolve bar unhook like maybe 1 out of 100 games. So it is definitely not a common thing at all. Just knocked out my headphones there. And like I said, I don't really think this needs to be addressed very much at all. I think this is fine. I don't think it's going to be abused or anything. You can pretty much just continue to ignore the anti-facecamp thing. If you're not doing it, this is not going to bother you, I would say 99 out of 100 times. Now, this is the section that interested me a lot. This is the section about tunneling. And the thing is, their data, to me, it makes absolutely no sense. But they start off by going and explaining what their definition of tunneling is. But the thing is, they're not consistent about it at all. This slide says going for the same survivor to get them out of the match as soon as possible. I think that's a completely fair and rational description of tunneling. But the problem is they use more than that. And they have this as the result in terms of data. They're saying that in 40% of matches, there is tunneling. You guys might be aware I did an experiment a little while ago, closer to January 25 than now, so it would be closer to that 44% there. But I did an experiment where I did 50 games and counted the actual prevalence of real tunneling. And here's the thing. I had a very clear-cut definition of tunneling. It was going after the same person 3 times until they die, basically. Because if it's anything but that, I don't think it's really worthy of complaining about. And here is the actual, main point I have to make here. There are forms of tunneling and slugging and camping, frankly, that are all kind of acceptable. And there are forms that are worthy complaints. The problem is we need to draw the line in the sand of what is an acceptable form of these things and what is okay, this is really unfun for everybody. And we need to be clear about that line. Because if you for example, with this data, they would be okay, in Endgame, a guy gets unhooked. He's on death hook there, and the killer, that's the only injured guy, so he just downs him, hooks him, and then that's it. That on their data would count as tunneling, because it was the same guy hooked twice in a row. But anyone that has played this game more than 10 hours would go, okay, yeah, well, what else was the killer going to do? There's nowhere else to go for. That's the only option he had, is the end of the game. What the fuck else is he going to do? That's my point. There's also acceptable, slugging. If you down a survivor and they are under a pallet and you see a guy with a flashlight nearby, typically even the most entitled survivor players will go, okay, well, obviously he can't pick me up. There's a guy right there. There are times, when even someone's getting camped and there's 3 survivors swarming the hook. Again, everyone but the most entitled people on the planet are going to go, okay, well, I mean, yeah, where else is he going to go? We're all right here. Obviously, he's going to sit near the hook. That's the thing. That's the thing that I think why our data differs so much. I had a very clear-cut definition of tunneling, and I said it was when someone is hooked just 3 times in a row until they're out of the match. That is hard tunneling. That is the tunneling worth complaining about, because that is the tunneling that deprives you of any real chance to do anything unless you have an anti-tunnel build. If you get hooked one time, then the killer hooks another guy, then hooks you again, and then goes to hook another guy, and then when you get unhooked, he goes back to kill you. That's not hard tunneling. That's just, yeah, he hooked you twice in a row, and that sucks for you, but you still got a chance to do other things in between all of this. It's not like you were deprived of the ability to play the match, and I don't think catering to people who complain about that is the correct call. The first scenario where this is, hook, dead, that is, yeah, I agree, something should probably be done about that, but if the killer is spreading hooks during the match and then happens to get 2 on you later or something like that in a row, I don't think that's really an issue worth complaining about. And the problem is, I didn't include that in my data, which is why I found tunneling was in 10 to 15% of my games. And they have found it to be in 40% of their games because they do include that in their criteria. They also, frankly, don't even know what the fuck their criteria is. The first definition they gave where, someone is just chased until they die, or they're, repeatedly chased until they die, that's fair. I think we can all agree with that there. But their second definition was if someone was hooked twice in a row at some point with no other variables there. And then their third definition, they didn't even know what the fuck they're talking about.
And when I say tunneling, there's different ways that we're analyzing it. The first one is when you go for one survivor and only one survivor from the start of the match. There's also when you go for consecutive hooks, not necessarily the first survivor that you find, but you just get the second survivor out of the match quickly. And then there's the last one, which I'm completely blanking out on. But this is the overall of all these scenarios that we analyzed.
So this may be a extremely narcissistic hot take. Don't take it too seriously, but I legitimately think my stupid little experiment with 50 anecdotal games and then I polled 3,000 people is more accurate to the actual amount of tunneling that goes on per match. Because I have been playing this game for 8 years. I have never in my life, in any streams I watch, any games I play, seen tunneling every other game. It just is not happening that much. And it's because, like I said, I think we are really bickering about the definitions of tunneling. Like, I don't consider hooking someone twice in a row after the killer's done other things to be tunneling. I don't consider that to be tunneling. And there's also so many other scenarios that can lead to that are not problematic. Like, if the guy if a survivor unhooks somebody, and then the guy that unhooked them just hides in a locker, the killer comes back and is like, okay, I guess I'm going for you. I don't see anybody else. Like, that's not something worthy of complaining about. You should bitch at your survivor there. You don't change Dead by Daylight to cater to that scenario. You tell that survivor he sucks and that he shouldn't do that. That's what I mean. There's a line in the sand that we have to draw between just sheer player incompetence and actually just really unfun mechanic that needs to be fixed. There is a line there, and I do think it's really clear to focus on that, because clearly, based on this data where they say it's happening in 40% of matches, they aren't doing that. This is a drastic overestimation of malicious or extremely unfun tunneling. Every other aspect of it usually allows the survivor to at least have a chance to breathe or do something else. Again, I'm sure there's a couple little exceptions there, but the difference between, a blight tunneling someone out 3 hooks in a row at 5 gens, and then a guy dying on their 6th hook, or, on the 6th hook of the match and something, are completely different things. And a further proof that their perception of tunneling is warped is their original penalty on the PTB was if you killed someone before 6 hooks, you would get the tunneling penalty. And as we know, you can kill somebody before 6 hooks and not have been tunneling that person. So, like I said, they have shown clearly they don't understand the problematic form of tunneling. They just see data of Unga Bunga, guy hooked twice in a row, put on stat. That is not how you should be looking at this. And that's why big data like this and stuff, it's not really reliable. That's why I'm saying I legitimately think my anecdotal evidence is more reliable than them just lumping every possible scenario. You know how many times I get a really quick down and then someone unhooks that person and then they just AFK under the hook because they don't want to play anymore? And then I don't want to just sit there and hear crows for 20 minutes, so then I just kill them. The game has now counted that as tunneling. Like, there are a million examples like this that are not problems with the game. They are problems with players. And you don't change the game because players are problematic. That's the issue, and that's probably the most correct way I can summarize the flaw in the way that they presented this. We do not want to change the game because of entitlement, basically. We do want to change the game for things that rob players of any chance to do anything when they couldn't really have any other choice about it. You can always say, well, just simply don't go down, forehead, but, I mean, that's a stupid argument. Like, you're going to go down at some point, right? And then if you don't have a chance to play after that, then it still feels like shit. But hopefully you guys get what I'm trying to say here, that it's not very black and white. There is a lot of nuance to what is an acceptable form of tunneling and slugging and camping and what are the problematic forms, and behavior very clearly needs to show us that they understand the difference between these scenarios, or we're going to be in a lot of trouble in terms of balance. They have the slide that says they want to ensure that every player's time is respected, which is fine, but again, you do need to draw the line there. There's a line between respecting players' time and coddling incompetence that you have to... It's really hard because you don't want to, make casual players miserable, but there's a level you have to draw there where, okay, but you need to do a little bit. It's very complicated. I understand the difficulty in doing this. They want to ensure that queuing up means you get to play. They want to ensure that player agency is retained, and they want to put the onus on the survivor. That basically means they want a survivor getting tunneled to be more about the survivor's impact on that scenario than the killer leaving them with no choice, basically. Which again is a little bit of a mixed bag of a statement. So let's look at what survivors are now getting when they get unhooked. They're getting the 10% haste and endurance as before. Now the problem is this shit lasts 30 seconds now. Previously, I don't know what they're going to do to perks like babysitter or borrowed time. You get endurance for 30 seconds. We even see it in the footage later. That is a lot of endurance, which means you can't wait out endurance anymore. You need to just hit them and get it over with, basically. The problem is they're going to be moving faster. They're going to be elusive, which means there's no aura, pools of blood, scratch mark. It's basically Iron Will and Lucky Break combined, basically. They make no sound. That's like the Iron Will part. no AFK points, meaning they can't like generate crows or anything. They can even see the killer's aura. I believe that lasts for like 10 seconds, and then it's lost in the standard way. So basically what they're doing here is making it so the killer no longer is going to have these weird penalties where if they get, 2 hooks in a row, blank happens, or if they get a kill before 6 hooks, you can't regress gens anymore. They're not making it that complicated. They're just simply going, okay, you know what? If you really want to tunnel this guy, you can, but it's now going to be much fucking harder because now they're moving faster for a longer time. You're not going to be able to hear them. They're going to be able to see you through walls. It's just going to be significantly harder to down that person. But with perseverance, you can still tunnel that person. So I think the whole goal here is to give survivors more of a fighting chance when they are getting tunneled, but they're not going to punish the killer if they successfully do it, which is probably an okay way to take it. I don't think I really hate this. I do think there's a couple of abuses here, but I don't think I hate that in concept. I'll have to play around with it. But like I said, I'm not like immediately hating this because I think that's a somewhat fair trade. I do think it does need to take the game state into account. If it's nearing the end of the match, these things should simply not exist. If there's like 1 or 2 gens left or a certain amount of progress, everything below the haste and endurance just simply shouldn't exist because at that point, the killer needs to kill someone. And then it should really only be used to stop people from being tunneled like at 5 gens and, getting them out of the match quickly. That I'm fine with. But I really think this would work better with like a dynamic scale, accounting for how the match is going and things like that. Strangely enough, they've also decided to bring collision back, and I even had people in my chat arguing, and I'm going to double down on this part. I don't understand how people are making the claim that having no collision was even worse for killer than survivors having collision. Because they're like, well, you could just phase into their model and force the auto aim. It's like, yeah, but that takes way more effort than just standing in front of someone and the killer can't walk past. That took way more effort. There were other things you could do, like wait at the loop or something like that and then drop a pallet. But that's still no different from a scenario of just body blocking that same exact area, except now you actually have to use a resource on top of that too. Like, I don't buy the argument that somehow no collision was even worse for the killer. There's only positives for the killer in that scenario. Again, there were a couple of examples of it being obnoxious because this happened on the Crossu's PTB, and the Crossu was really heavily affected by body blocks. So people were like, oh, they're still doing it, and it feels bad. It's like, yeah, because for that exact killer in scenario, sure, that can feel really bad. But I still would have preferred the no collision, so I'm actually not happy they added that back. So what do killers get now for going for unique hooks? Previously, we got like a barbecue and chili effect. We got like a pop goes the weasel effect. We got some haste to get somewhere else. We got kind of a decent amount of bonuses here. So now first up, we're getting Bloodlust for 15 seconds. They changed it to Bloodlust rather than Haste because Bloodlust is a flat value and Haste is multiplicative. So basically, Bloodlust only makes you move 0.2 meters a second faster. It's just a flat addition. Whereas if you were to be given 5% Haste, that would stack with like Spirit Phasing or Wraith moving faster while cloaked. Multiplicatively, you would move even faster. So changing that to a flat value, I understand, so it can't be comboed with powers and things like that. That's fine. But it's also kind of nothing. 5% haste for 15 seconds, that goes away when you get into a chase. All right, I'll get to a gen a second faster. Okay, it's basically a slap on the wrist. It's not really much of anything. You get some more blood points now, which is great. But for the most part, I'll just blanket statement. Killers are really just not getting rewarded at all for getting unique hooks. This is more a deterrent for getting the same hooks than a benefit for getting unique hooks. So, killers, I believe, did not really get enough in this scenario. And I don't see the balance here. It's just, okay, you move a little bit faster and it goes away on chase. It's essentially nothing. Just even the base kit pop, I would have preferred if they just like toned it down or something like that. Just give us something, give us some incentive, but this is just basically no incentive at all. Next, we're going to go into slugging, which I have always felt was not too big of a deal in this game, especially with things like We're Gonna Live Forever and just exponential and unbreakable and conviction and plot. There's just so many tools that help teams that are being slugged and stuff like that that I've never really considered to be a huge killer strength. Like, given the right time and the right scenario, occasional slugging is very smart and builds pressure and stuff like that. But I oftentimes, if I'm starting to go for multiple slugs, the chance of We're Gonna Live Forever or Made for This and stuff like that, I end up like doing worse sometimes. So I've never really felt slugging was like, an overpowered problematic thing. And it's really not a very widespread issue, at least in terms of extended slugging. Across all MMRs, killers apparently slug for on average about 30 seconds, which Not a very big deal. People were freaking out about 90-second self-unbreakable in the PTB, but the average is 30 seconds. So we're not even close to that. So I on the PTB, I was one of the few people that I didn't really care about the 90-second self-unbreakable thing, because I would say maybe 1 in 30 matches I'd actually slug someone for that long. It was such a rare thing for me that I personally just did not give a shit. But for the most part, I thought it was just fine. So how are they changing things? So the resolve bar now takes 120 seconds to fill. So it used to be 90 seconds after 90 seconds slugged. Consecutive times doesn't matter. It's just a cumulative thing. You'd be able to pick yourself up and sort of like an unbreakable effect. Now, if you went down again, you'd still have to recover for over 30 seconds to do it again. You don't just pop back up immediately, and you don't get the bonus recovery speed of unbreakable or anything like that. But it's still, the base kit takes 120 seconds. So if one guy is slugged, it's even slower than on PTB now. However, if there's like 2 people slugged, then it's closer to being, the 90 seconds that it used to be. And if there's 3 people slugged, then it's 66% faster. And then if the entire team is slugged, now you can all unbreakable in 40, 50 seconds. And I think this is honestly completely fine. I don't really think this is an issue at all. I think having someone slugged for, a little bit because they're under a pallet or something like that is fine. Maybe you get another down 2, and then you're able to chain that into a third one. You're still going to have 90 seconds to keep those 2 guys on the ground and try to get more pressure after a third down or something. But it's to the point where if you're just 4-man slugging, something's going horribly wrong for the survivors. And then being able to pick themselves up after 50 seconds, I don't really see as the end of the world. Because as killer, if you've gotten 4 downs like that, you have likely built so much pressure that you are in no position to lose anymore. You are very likely going to win that match. Now, there are scenarios like at the end of the game, maybe this should be disabled or something like that. If there's all the gens are done or something like that, I can see end game scenarios where the killer's not actually winning. It's very close. And then these things shouldn't really take into, count anymore. And I'm very consistent about my thoughts with that. I think a lot of these things are fine. They just need to take the state of the game into account. If there's 1 or 0 gens left, a lot of this shit should not even function whatsoever, because the game is basically over at that point and there needs to be no more hand-holding. We basically need to let everyone play the match out, but not punish people once it's already over. That's kind of the vibes I've been going for here. But I think this is fine. I think, if you're slugging occasionally, this is actually going to make it even less powerful Survivor. But if you're, 4-man slugging every game, you're going to feel this burn a lot more. And I kind of don't care. I think that's good. I think builds that rely on just slugging the entire team, until they bleed out, is just miserable and shouldn't be in the game. It's more of a killer-specific issue. You're going to be well, this hurts the Twins. And I'm yeah, but that's not a game problem. That's a Twins problem. The Twins design just sucks. Will always be miserable to go against, and that's because the Twins is shit, not because the game is shit. So changing everything else because the Twins has to slug or the Oni has to slug, not a good idea in my opinion. There are killers that will be, like I said, disproportionately affected by this, but it's not really something you should cater the entire game around. In terms of other stuff in the actual stream that they did, a couple of other notable things. Colored scratch marks, very cool. I think that's going to be really nice for visibility on a lot of maps. And in fact, you can change it as the camera's rotating in the start. So if I'm on Ormond, I'm going to go for I'll keep them on red. But if I'm on Coldwind that's got an orange or yellow tint, I'm going to change it to blue. Makes it a lot easier to see. I think that's great. Surprised it took them almost 9 years to do that, but I'm very happy to see that. I think that's very, very good, so I'm happy to see that. There's also some Skull Merchant buffs, which are just hilarious because they were hey, we're doing a rework, 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 we're doing a rework. Okay, here's some buffs. Is this enough? Is this fine? It's fine. All right, that's all you get. And then they're just going to fuck off. So I found that hilarious. I'm going to be completely unbiased and honest here. I don't give a shit about Skull Merchant whatsoever. So I don't care about that. That's it, though. I think that were the main issues in the actual video itself. There's some stuff about merch and stuff, but whatever. I think I covered all the main parts, but I'm going to call it here. I'm still absolutely exhausted, as you can probably tell by my voice, but that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.